That morning when I walked into the backyard, I knew something was off. I felt it within the very first second. Not the kind of something is wrong feeling, but something deeper. It was too quiet, so quiet that it didn't feel like a living garden. No cicadas, no sound of insect wings beating, no faint rustling between leaves. The air felt frozen, and I stood at the doorway holding my coffee. I waited for a few seconds, then slowly walked forward. The next second, I saw the pumpkins, or rather where they were supposed to be. Only the stems were left, and all the leaves were completely gone. Not the kind of damage where edges are just eaten or torn. It looked as if someone had taken a blade overnight and cleaned every leaf away. The debris was evenly scattered on the ground, like a crime scene that had been carefully wiped down. At that moment, I didn't curse or panic, I just stood there. A very strange thought flashed through my mind. Here we go again. But this time was different, because I suddenly realized this was no pest problem. It was a cycle I had been unknowingly maintaining for over 20 years. Have you ever experienced something exactly like this? Spring arrives, everything looks normal, and you feel incredibly confident. The seedlings grow well, and you start planning how to allocate your harvest. Then June comes, and the first wave of insects finally appears. You spray pesticides, and the problem briefly disappears. They come back stronger in July, so you switch to a stronger chemical. By August, absolutely everything is completely out of control. You start questioning the weather, the seeds, and the soil. You even wonder whether you are simply not suited for growing vegetables. But you never question one specific thing, whether the method you are using is wrong in the first place. I was the same until that year, after nearly losing my entire garden. I finally decided to go visit a very specific place. A place with no signboard, no brochure, and no demonstration garden label. It was just a simple backyard on the edge of a farm. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew immediately. What I had been growing all those years was not a garden. It was nothing more than a giant bug breeding farm. The first thing I saw wasn't plants, but a very counterintuitive kind of stability. No outbreaks, and no single patch of leaves being completely devoured. No overnight disaster that wipes out an entire garden bed. Not even the constant tension that normally exists in everyday gardening. Insects were present, but they did not dominate. They were simply part of the ecosystem. At the time, I really didn't understand that sentence. But later, I realized it was the key to the entire system. Many people think the secret to a pest-free garden is extermination. They are wrong, completely and utterly wrong. The real secret is preventing pests from ever reaching an explosive population state. Notice that I said explosion, and not just mere existence. In natural systems, insects never actually disappear. Catastrophic infestations only occur under one condition, which is system imbalance. And the source of that imbalance is almost always human intervention itself. I crouched down and looked closely at the soil, which was neither clean nor tidy. It had layers, and the surface was covered with dead leaves. It was full of grass clippings and broken plant matter. When I gently lifted it, the soil underneath was moist, loose, and springy. In that moment, I realized something incredibly critical. Almost everything I had done in my own gardening practice had been destroying this structure. Like tilling the soil, overcleaning everything, and leaving the ground bare. Like using pesticides that wiped out all organisms indiscriminately. I thought I was managing the garden, but I was doing something else entirely. Repeatedly resetting the ecosystem to zero, and wondering why it never stayed stable. Now here's the core idea you really need to understand. Pests are not the problem. Pest outbreaks are the actual problem. And outbreaks are never caused by having too many insects. They are caused by predators being eliminated and food chains breaking down, environments turning into ideal breeding grounds for pests. When I put all of this together, I realized something very uncomfortable. I was not growing vegetables. I was continuously optimizing conditions for pests to thrive. That sentence is incredibly harsh, but it is completely true. Later, I began to understand the structure of that garden. It wasn't planting crops, it was a system designed to control pests through ecology itself. Its core was not killing insects, but rather 4 distinct layers: the soil life layer and the mulch cover layer, the predator habitat layer and the inducement layer. When I first understood this logic, I felt almost ridiculous. I had been gardening with a war mindset, while this place operated with a systems mindset. But what truly changed me was something very small. I noticed they used no sprays, no repellents, and no weekly preventive chemicals. They used absolutely nothing at all. Yet aphids never became a disaster, because the moment they appeared, they were already suppressed by the ecological structure. They were not killed, but simply prevented from expanding. In that moment, I understood something very clearly. True pest control is not about eliminating insects. It is about ensuring insects never get the chance to become a problem. Most home gardens fail, not because of technique, but because of structure. You are not failing because you spray too little. You are failing because you never built a system capable of self-balance. After that, I did something completely against traditional gardening instincts. I stopped planting first, and I started by building the environment. First, I completely stopped having bare soil. Bare soil is not clean, it is completely exposed. Exposed to egg-laying pests, overheating sun, and rapid water loss. It also leads to disrupted microbial life. So I began covering it with hay, leaves, branches, and grass clippings. 3 weeks later, the soil softened and earthworms appeared. The moisture finally stopped disappearing so quickly. Second, I abandoned monoculture and switched to mixed planting. Third, I intentionally created messy boundaries, things like weed strips, stone piles, and wood piles. Fourth, I supported natural predators by planting functional flowers. Fifth, I stopped reacting after pests appeared. I instead began fixing system weaknesses in advance. Then change happened. The insects were still there, but the problems disappeared. Aphids did not vanish, but they never reached destructive levels. Caterpillars still existed, but they never destroyed entire plants. I no longer needed to handle pest problems. The real shift was not that insects disappeared. It was that the system began controlling them itself. Later, I finally understood the essence of that Amish-style garden. They are not pest-free. They just never allow pests to reach a runaway state. Many people think gardening is about growing plants. In a truly stable ecosystem, plants are not the starting point. They are the result. The actual starting point is the structure itself. If the structure is wrong, whatever you plant is only temporary. A backyard food forest is not about growing more. It is about letting the system work for you, instead of you constantly repairing it. The most stable gardens are not the cleanest ones. They are slightly wild, because that wildness is actually ecological buffering. The cleaner the system, the more fragile it becomes. Because there are no predators, no competition, and absolutely no buffer. A real system must include 4 distinct layers: the soil layer, the cover layer, the structural layer, and the biological layer. And the sequence matters: first cover, then edge systems, then main crops, and finally controlled chaos. Insects do not disappear, they become incapable of exploding. That is the endpoint. Not no pests, but no catastrophic pest outbreaks. Looking back over 20 years, I reach a very direct conclusion. I was never really growing food. I was repeatedly creating unstable systems, and then trying to fix them with tools. Spraying pesticides was not solving the problem, it was just delaying collapse. A mature system moves in only one direction: reduce human intervention and let the ecosystem take over control.